Starting. Okay, as we all know, this is probably the fourth time I've debated this gentleman. It's Owen McDonald. And today we're going to be having a discussion. Whoa, hold on. This is okay. I had the thing open. Okay, I've debated him about four times, and we're going to be starting with the immigration thing, then maybe moving on to where me and him are. It's Grand Canyon between us, and that's capitalism versus socialism. So Owen, why don't you start us off?
Okay. So the way I see things, you look at the way America conducts itself with its immigration policies, and certainly over recent terms, this has come to quite a fulcrum, really, with the sort of ICE and stuff. But it comes as a long-standing point of contention, really, that there are atrocious practices in place in America for immigrants. And it's not just America, it's all over the world, it's any nation really. Because people, human beings, are having their freedoms imposed on with the inability to move around across the land. You see a state saying, no, this is not, you cannot enter here. When these people are ultimately only trying to increase their chances of survival. And the fact that it's not just like the fact that they're imposing on that right by itself is obviously bad. But on top of that, you also see the separation of families, the inhumane treatment, the impeaching, the imposing on human liberties, civil liberties, even the dehumanizing conditions they're kept in. And ultimately, it's not any way for a just and fair society to operate itself on. When you look at the way human beings are being treated, it's not on. And there's different axes you can go down to approach how to resolve such a problem. But on a very basic
Okay,
level, it's just not good to be doing this.
okay. There's a couple of interesting things that you said. You basically implied that people have the right to leave one country and go to another. When in fact, no, they don't. Nobody has the right to come to America. Okay? That's just the way it is. I don't have the right to go to Mexico if Mexico doesn't want to have me there. I don't have the right to go to England if England doesn't want to have me there. Nobody has the right to emigrate to a country if a country doesn't want to let this person emigrate. Further, and let's be honest, these people are committing a crime. Crossing the border illegally is a crime in every country on earth, just about. I'm sure there's probably a couple where it's not, but almost every country in the world, it is a crime. Now, when any parent, even if they have a child, commits a crime, we separate them because we can't throw a child in jail. Okay? Because they're incapable of committing a crime because they can't consent, especially if they're like under 5. So, you might think it's I don't know, cruel or inhumane, but they don't have any relatives here. The parents did break the law. And again, unless you want to say that a parent with a small child is above the law because they have a small child, or you want to get rid of borders entirely, which did not work out well for Europe. Again, you don't have the right just to walk into a country because yours happens to be a shithole.
Okay, so lots to respond to. But first off, I'll start with a nice simple question. You said it's no one's right. Why is it not anyone's right?
Why is it not anyone's right to emigrate?
Freedom of movement. Why is that
Yeah,
not right?
because a country has the right to have its border to basically, a country does have the right to its sovereignty. And if it does not want to allow outsiders in, like nobody immigrates to the Papal States, which is a legitimate country. Nobody immigrates to it. They do not allow anyone to immigrate to it. I don't think Trinidad and Tobago, which is another country which if you are not born there, you're not going to be a citizen of. Every country has the right to set the immigration policy that they feel is right for their country.
Okay.
We have a bunch of people fleeing from Mexico because Mexico has got several problems. One of the big ones one of the easiest ones that Mexico could fix would be allow the citizenry to arm itself. And again, if you let mass numbers of people in, a lot of people we don't want are going to be in there. And again, crossing the border illegally is a crime. If I cross into Mexico illegally, I will be arrested by the Mexican authorities. If I cross into Canada illegally, I'll be arrested by the Canadian authorities.
Okay. So going back to what you said at the start about this whole segment, you said it's a country's sovereign right to have control over their borders. Why?
Because it's their country.
Why is it their country?
Because probably due to thousands of years of warfare or whatever, they have had this. I mean, I get the argument of where you're going. That yes, it's an arbitrary line on a map, but
it's more than just an arbitrary line, though, isn't it? Because there's actively no real justification for it. It's just, oh, it's ours. There's no. In many of these cases, it's through legitimate like genocide and slavery and all these other like ills of the past. So why would this country just have the inherent right to deny people the opportunity to travel to a land? What gives them the authority to say that, other than just, this is our state? There's no justification behind that.
Yeah, there is. It's again, you could argue that it's an arbitrary line, but the fact is we have borders. We can have these borders defended if we so choose. Again,
that's not
that mass again, and I go back to Europe, which tried to get away from borders, and it did not work out very well. You've got to.
We'll come on to Europe in a second, Warcorpse, but that doesn't. What you just said there doesn't really answer my point, which is that why does this state have the inherent right to just do this when, as we've established, the occupation of the land that it has isn't really legitimate. It comes through genocide, warfare, just sort of happen chance.
Okay, I assume you're talking about when we expanded westward and fought the Indians for 400 years and won their land in a war. Here's the thing that is not taught in a lot of schools. Yeah, we did a lot of fucked up shit in that war, but we had a lot of fucked up shit done to us. And in fact, even if we didn't have the war, the Native American population was relatively doomed anyway, just due to the fact that we carried a bunch of diseases that they had no immunity to. I mean, the Indian Wars, this mythologized, and I don't know where it started, this mythologized version of the West didn't happen.
What do you mean it didn't happen? The genocide and the slavery
that we just waltzed in there, slaughtered them wholesale. It didn't happen that way. We fought a lot of wars. They were our greatest rivals, and they won their fair share of those wars too.
I mean, it doesn't really translate to today, does it? Where the essentially Native American land has been confined to tiny little spaces, and
they make a shit ton of money off of it because they can have gambling on their land.
How does that affect the average Native American? That it's not. But regardless, that doesn't change the fact that, going back to the main point, that the state,
and also
the state of that that country, but not just America, but other countries as well, that land, it's not, how is it theirs legitimately? It's just theirs because they killed a lot of people and took it. So then how do they have an intrinsic right?
Well then how the fuck was it the Native Americans intrinsically? Because they were slaughtering other Native Americans' tribe and taking it.
it wasn't theirs intrinsically. And I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, Native American society was perfect, because obviously not. Things 500 years
But
ago were pretty different. But
but
at the same time, Walcott, that doesn't mean that the the colonist Western imperialist powers were justified in doing what they did either. The long-lasting legacy we see today is one where our nations, America, Britain, France, Germany, all our nations are extremely wealthy at the expense of the rest of the world and the expense of the people who live here. So for America to then turn and say to people, entering the country, normally to better their lives, to try and survive more because of the economic conditions not being as fruitful up in other places, for them to say, oh no, you can't come here, we're going to separate you from your kids and brutalize you and put you in a prison, essentially, that's not right. There's no justification behind that.
but would you okay? Do you believe that if somebody commits a crime, that we should have some form of punishment for them, aka prison? These people are committing a crime.
So what? Why is things being a crime?
So you're fine with your stuff getting stolen then?
That's not quite the same thing, though, is it? Because
why is it a
one of
crime's
those
a
things,
crime?
my stuff is my personal property, whereas the land in America that's not personal, is
That's
it? There's no.
ours. That's all of
It's not.
ours.
It's not ours, though, is
And
it?
also,
Because why is it
why do we
ours?
okay, then why do I as an American have a responsibility to Mexicans? The answer is I don't.
Well,
Mexico can fix its own country.
this is part of a wider topic, really, because it's not down to the individual person to just
And
suddenly have
and
the resources, Warcorpse. It's
and
down
take
to
a look.
us as a society as a whole to say, oh, well, we've got the resources quite easily to provide for everyone and more. But we have to look at the wider point of, why do people move to Western countries in greater numbers than people move from Western countries to others? And it's because of the poor distribution our system has, where the legacy of colonialism, where our countries have actively pillaged the world of their resources and hoarded them in their own countries. And it's no surprise that people in the global south are going to be moving here in greater numbers, but they aren't a threat to the average worker like you or I. The threat comes from the capitalist system around it. But going back to that,
Okay, hold up. I gotta counter that. The threat is, I would argue, the reason that people come to the West is because of our capitalist system, because it's the best system that we've ever come up with as humans. The thing is, I'm not particularly worried about the guy. You know, I'm fine with like a pathway to citizenship where like a guy who's a background check comes back on him, he's clean and he serves in the military for a couple of years. Okay, fine. He can be in the club. What I'm worried about is all the people we don't want that do come over during mass immigrations, like MS-13, the most violent gang on the goddamn planet. You know, and again, you said something else too. I mean, you said that Western Europe, we pillaged the look at Japan. That is an economic powerhouse, and 80 years ago it was a smoldering wreck. And thanks to Western philosophy, capitalism, it's gone from that to what it is now.
um,
And again, they're good luck becoming a Japanese citizen. Again, if we don't have borders and everyone can just move. Also, here's another thing that borders do. The problems that you have over in England are completely different than the problems that we have here in the United States. And the problems that like Vermont has are completely different than the problems that I have here in Minnesota. Another good thing for borders is, again, it also makes sure that, it makes sure that local populations can run their countries as they see fit. This is why I don't think a world government would ever work, because quite frankly, nobody in Japan gives a rat's ass about anybody in Australia. Their problems are totally different.
Okay, so lots to respond to. Um, the best system being capitalism. Obviously you're going to say that, and we'll come to that in a bit. But um, okay, so you said, oh, people we don't want, people we don't like MS-13 coming in. Firstly, MS-13 has been an issue that's been really blown out of proportion. It's hardly as though like there's just trucks of people coming over with like guns and like shooting up people. Like it's not out of some film. It's like not a big thing. Secondly, says who? Who can just say to someone else, you can't come here based on where's the authority and the legitimacy of that coming from?
It's okay.
Fine, the state says that,
Yeah.
Warcorpse. The state says, oh, you can't come here. But as we discerned earlier, there's no legitimate grounds for the state existing in this form. It's just, oh, the state exists because the state exists. This is the
Well,
law
you
because this
have
is
to
the
have a
law.
state.
But you don't. Says who? What? The
So,
state.
so what? We just
And
have anarchy?
not anarchy necessarily, but the
Well,
state is a system
a
that
stateless society would be an
indeed,
anarcho society.
not
You have to have.
necessarily, but you Warcorpse, if you'd let me finish
All
just
right,
a
all right.
second. You know, the fact that we see these borders as these, oh, we need them to keep ourselves safe. Safe from what? We got to look at the wider context of why these things exist, and ultimately the state exists as a means for the wealthy, the ruling class, to preserve their power and their land. There's no reason, it's not like as though workers are benefiting from this, because what land does the average worker house? Most people don't own their homes. Most people don't own any land. Like the people, the land that is in these borders is privately owned by mega corporations and stuff predominantly. But then moving on to the stuff you were saying about Japan. Japan is often projected as this example of why immigration shouldn't be needed, because actually we can do amazing. But look at the consequences. It's an economic powerhouse, but it's fundamentally reliant on technology and stuff. And subsequently other industries are failing because of that. It's got extremely low birth rates, which means that the population is aging and they don't really have, they're going to need people coming in or massively boost up their birth rates to solve the fact that they've got too many people to sustain themselves. They've got some of the highest depression and suicide rates on the planet, because they're because of the way things are there. The fact it's such a a socially conservative country, and the fact that it's so there's such a pressure to meet these standards, the population is pretty unhappy. There's a whole host of problems in Japan which are often ignored, and to place their supposed successes on capitalism and not many immigrants is inane, I find. But coming back to my main point for this just opening sort of ideal about stuff, you can't say to me that a state says you can't do this so it's bad. What authority does the state have to impose these rules on like society? Look at what things have been said by the state in the past, like gay marriage, race equality, not giving all genders the vote. So many things and more you can think of which has just been, this is the law so it's in place. But that the law is not the same as justice. You got to understand that, and it's quite easy to see through history that that's the case. So using that principle, you can see that the way immigrants are being treated, and the fact that we even criminalize people who cross a a line in the ground as illegal and bad, is ridiculous. And I'll come on to the stuff you said about anarchy just briefly as well. About how could stateless society work? I wouldn't want a world government. Well, what you described when you said that people where you live in Michigan, is it Michigan? Do you live in, or is it
Minnesota.
Minnesota? Yeah,
In
Minnesota.
Minnesota.
People in Minnesota, they don't have the same situation as people in Montreal or Japan or Australia or something. And that's obvious because people across the globe aren't going to have the same experience everywhere. But that's not what a state society would be. It's not like you're going to have like just a bunch of bureaucrats somewhere in one place dictating everyone else. It's about breaking down the state and having local communities managing themselves. And yeah, you've got a global like series of connections and stuff, but it's worker led, it's worker owned. There's no like domineering wealthy state infrastructure designed to control land and preserve the social class. It's a movement and an idea socialism and later communism that is designed to break down the class structure and the unfair hierarchy and the idea that people can be persecuted like this. And you'd see so many benefits from it. For one, immigration isn't going to be a considered problem because it's just people moving around freely. There's not going to be the lack of resources because resources are distributed fairly and everyone has their needs provided because we've clearly got enough on the planet to sustain everyone. Suddenly it's not all just people moving to one area because like I said earlier, things are distributed fairly. The hierarchy and the hegemony that allows Western powers to be so wealthy is gone, and suddenly the quality of life in other parts of the world goes up. But coming back to the main point about immigration, you've got to look at the context around it and the lack of justification for the state to operate in the way it does.
Okay, lot to counter. You said the canned the standard response I hear from a lot of socialists that human beings, we're not communal creatures. We never have been. We never will be. The reality is you're always going to have inequality, and in every time they have tried a socialist state, the inequality is 1,000 times worse, or everybody is just a hell of a lot poorer. Getting to your point about uh, uh the okay, the reason the state exists and the reason the state has the authority is we have basically said that for society to function, everyone must act within certain parameters. Like, I'm not allowed to shoot you, I'm not allowed to take your shit. And we've said that these people get to have the authority to, and we elect them, and blah, blah, blah. The great thing about our law, though, you did mention that, yes, some of the laws that we have had in the past are unjust, but we changed the laws or got rid of them. The idea that, you know, what's mine is everybody's, or we don't have property lines, or we don't have that's insane. That's like stating that you can just walk into somebody's house because you're homeless and it's cold outside. Well, no. You know, the reason that borders and property lines exist is to literally say this is mine, and this is human beings. Human beings are not these communal creatures that are, yes, we can be, and yes, there are times, and it's generally when shit hits the fan that we switch to a more communal type of wanting to help everyone that we can. But when everything's going hunky-dory, we're not sharing. Okay, we're competitive. This is mine, this is yours. uh and that's why capitalism works so well, because it does feed into that natural thing in humans to basically, for lack of a better term, want to acquire, want to conquer, or something, or whatever. I hate to use that dramatic of a language. But again, okay, let's say that and to think that we have all of these resources right now. There's so many people on this planet. We need about 1.5 Earths. We need another half of an Earth for everyone to have enough. And there's a lot of places on the planet that, quite frankly, like Burma, which has been involved in a brutal civil war for 70 years, well, they got other problems than, maybe work on stopping that. Again, the only way you're ever going to get, quite frankly, the only way you're ever going to get to this idea, or the only way it might work, like this Star Trek utopia you're kind of talking about, is if we, quite frankly, had a matter replicator that could replicate whatever we needed whenever we needed it. Outside of that, sorry, I mean, again, I just look at the track record of capitalism, and it's done way more harm than good. 100 million people are dead because of communism. Well, it's true.
It's not true though.
It's
I mean, it's true. It's true that people have died in like the USSR. But to call
about
it
100,
communist,
about 100 million are, well,
to
what was
call it communist though, that's just not
the
accurate political analysis.
the USSR was communism. Was
Well, it wasn't.
communistic. Yes, it was. It was communism.
Warcorpse? Was it worker owned?
Okay, and let me get to that. If the idea that, you know, I really hope one day you, Owen, as you go through life, that you actually start a business of your own and have a couple of employees.
Well, that's regardless of
Because
that, Warcorpse. The
you're gonna
question,
that's gonna die on the vine. Is the idea worker owned is what you're gonna have is at best a very slow moving, inefficient business.
but
At
Warcorpse, sorry to cut you off, but that's not, regardless of what you personally think or what you think communism is or whatever, is if the USSR is not worker owned, but on a basic level you can't describe it as communist. That's not that's not just, oh, I like the system. It's just political analysis. If it's not worker owned, if there's
well, it was
no
state owned.
well, that's not communist then. And that's what you can't just tell me that a dictator, controlling people and commodifying resources and stuff is worker owned when the workers are quite literally being suppressed. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the state was good at all, but it wasn't bad because it was communist. It was not communist at all. And that goes for other countries that have often called themselves socialist. It's a more complex issue than, oh, it's socialist, it's killed lots. But an even more stark point comes from the fact that 20 million people die from capitalism every single year. How many people are killed on the globe needlessly every single year? And if you add it up over all the years, it's far more than even the biggest projection of supposedly socialist countries.
Where do you get the 20 million people are dying from capitalism?
Well, world hunger, curable diseases.
Capitalism is
Poverty.
doing far more to combat that, and we have fewer people in poverty today than ever before. The infant mortality rate on this planet is at its lowest level in human history. World hunger is going down.
Warcorpse. That's well. Firstly, that's the
and that's because capitalism can afford us the compassion.
That's not workers produce. Capitalism merely distributes poorly. So the technological advancements are done by workers, and it's the capitalist that merely distributes the the produce of that labor that the workers do from workers to the capitalist. So
that's not how this works. Okay,
that is how it works though, because it's the worker is the person who makes the I don't know, the hospital, for instance, builds a hospital, puts all the beds in it and stuff. The workers do that, the nurses and the doctors, and it's the people at the top making the money from it, which are the capitalist actively sort of denigrating the people doing the labor. You look at the fact that you can look at the things you were saying. World hunger, yeah, it's gone down, but is it going down because of the distribution of society based on capitalism? Is it coming down because of private property and these ideals of capitalism, or is it the efforts of worker movement and labor?
No, it's one of the big things is that it's going down due to the fact that these rich capitalists that you hate so much give a bunch of money to charitable organizations that can help these people.
Why should the charity even need to exist in the first place?
Thanks to capitalism, it provides people the incentive to make crops better or to give money to the researchers that can make the crops that can grow in these areas that are getting decimated by hunger and whatnot.
That's not even true though,
and if you take a look at it, Owen, all you've got to do is look at the world. Look at the Western world. For Christ's sakes, 300 years ago, we were dying of smallpox. If your doctor wanted to do the medical procedures that they did 300 years ago, you'd run out of the office screeching. And thanks to capitalism, which provides the best incentive on the planet to it basically always has the necessity for invention. Necessity is the mother of all inventions. And it always has that necessity because people like money. It gives you an incentive to make things better. For Christ's sakes, when we landed on the moon, the computer that did that was less powerful than a calculator you can pick up at Walmart. I don't know if you guys have Walmarts in the UK, but whatever your big chain store over there is. And capitalism has made our lives, quite frankly, better than any other system on the planet.
Like I said a second ago, it's the labor of workers who have produced like better technological advancements and stuff. It's capitalism that merely distributes the produce of said labor, the value of this labor.
No, it's not.
It is, because look at the people.
Take a look at the script.
Look at the people who are making the computer or the iPhone and stuff. The money, so the labor is being done by workers across the world who either make the phone or get the components for it or deliver it to various places or sell it to you in the shop. All that labor goes into it. And then at the end, these people are paid like minimum wage or barely even, a living. And
no, they're
they
not.
on top get like a fortune. So you think working in a sweatshop in like Thailand or something is gonna pay you loads?
Would you like to know a fact about the sweatshops that not a lot of people want to talk about? It's the fact that in the countries where those exist, they want the jobs. They're desperate for the jobs because these people have two choices: either work in there, or you have to subsistence farm. Meaning, if you get a bad year, you could starve to death.
How? So
a lot of these things are in developing countries. Okay, America had sweatshops. So did England. We just grew up.
Well, okay. Firstly, you literally just said that the people want to work there because the choice is work or starve. That's not wanting to work there.
No, I said work or subsistence farm.
Which firstly pays less, and secondly, if it doesn't go well, you could starve. So the choice is fairly obvious as to what most people are going to do.
And
that's not a choice.
And for their area where they live in their country, it's not a bad paying job.
Yeah, because it's like these companies have a monopoly on the land and the resources. You literally describing a situation in which people are essentially having to go and work in these places because if they don't, they're not going to have enough to survive. And that doesn't even excuse the fact that these sweatshops are terrible shifts, awful working conditions, no health and safety, no striking rights, no unions, no the accommodation essentially is on site because they can't afford anywhere else. And all to make someone, in Apple's higher ups, 6-7 figure salary. Is it, they're the ones doing the labor, the producers are, products, but the value of that labor is going to the capitalist. Capitalism is actively holding back, these people in society. And imagine how much more productive society could be if we had we utilize everyone's full capacity and have everyone living a decent, healthy life, which we could easily do. I wanted to come back to some things you said earlier, actually. Some to do with this, some slightly different. Let's look at the idea we're not communal creatures. That's not, there's no like hardwired, oh yeah, we're capitalists in us. The first humans, lived together, learned how to survive by working with each other to grow into the best predator on the planet. We didn't just do it because, we got to be the best. We did it by realizing that we're stronger together. And even if we were even if we were these individualistic creatures, it's not like an inherent trait. We can but we're at the point where we're beyond a primate sort of state. We can move beyond it, and it doesn't even really have that much relevance to the way society is today, because we have clearly evolved beyond the basic sort of formations of life. You talk about incentive and you say people like having money. Well, under capitalism, of course, because if you don't have money, how are you going to pay for things? That's a given. But we've lived under system of control and power and a class system and hierarchies for so long. But it's natural that we're sort of raised to believe, oh, we need money to survive, we need to work for what we have. And then you take a closer look at it, and it's, oh, we've got all these resources in society, we produce all this stuff, and yet overwhelmingly it's going to the people at the very top. There's how many people live like near or below the poverty line, whilst we have people earning millions, billions even at the top of society. Imagine if all that resource and wealth was used to benefit everyone in society. Suddenly everyone's got a home, everyone's got a house, everyone's got a house, food, water, healthcare, electricity. That's not something that's inachievable. That's something that is made inaccessible and accessible because of the capitalist system around it. Let's talk about property. You talk about the end of private property as though like people would just literally walk into your house, and that's a misunderstanding of what we talk about when we talk about private property. Your house and the things you have in it, which you need to live and make your life better, that's your personal property. So, like the pen I'm jotting down notes with now, that's my personal property. Private property is land used to commodify and make and turn into capital. So for instance, a corporation owning like a massive farming complex, that doesn't need to happen. That's a corporation stealing the land from society and the workers for its own benefit. A landlord owning like a quarter of the city's like residencies to extract rent from the people who live there, that's private property. There's no justification for that. That's just, oh, I'm rich and wealthy and I'm going to exploit you. And similarly, a state drawing up borders for itself, to protect its land and stuff, and not protect it from anything legitimate, and protect the people inside it, but to preserve the power system, the unjust power system that they sit on top of. There's so many things you said. You said, oh, the state exists because we said we're gonna make some rules. It's like it's not we who said it, it's them. They had their wealth, that they had their power, and they used the state to create a preservation for that. And you don't get to have we don't get to have a say. They just make the rule, and we go along with it. And you can say, oh yeah, you said, oh, we can change laws, but for one, that doesn't change the fact that it still has to go to the people in charge of the state. It's not as though we have direct control like we would see under a socialist system. There's no direct worker control. It's people on top who we occasionally, every few years get to vote for. But secondly, democracy in many countries is pretty flawed. The flaws of a first past the post system is ridiculous. You also got gerrymandering, voter suppression, the effects of capitalism and democracy. Capitalism is often, we often see capitalists subvert democracy to protect their own capital as per the system. I can keep going on. You talk about how we need 1.5 Earths to sustain everyone. That isn't actually true. That's carbon footprint you're talking about. And yeah, we've got a problem with global warming, but that is not on the individual. That's on the society as a whole. With corporations and wealthy entities actively subverting, ethical practices to make more money. Capitalism in action there. Capitalists cutting corners and commodifying the earth to make more capital, to make more profits.
Okay. I gotta respond.
Sorry, I'm just reading off all the notes I've written over the last. Like,
yeah, well, I do the same thing too. Okay, I'm not writing anything down. I'm just going off the cuff. Okay, one of the big points that you made. There's 2 points that you made that I want to address. One, you made this point about personal property and private property, and okay, you're fine with personal property. The problem is that my house, while it's private property, is also my personal property. If I own a business, that is not just private property, that's personal property as well. Same as the landlord that owns, 50 tenant buildings or 50 apartment complexes. personal and private means virtually the same thing. And again, I find it weird that you're just fine taking somebody that happens to make above X. Or I don't know. Do you think that there should be a maximum like level of what you can possibly earn? Like after this, you have to give it all away. That you're just fine with at the point of a gun, basically using the governmental force, because that's the only way you're going to get this done, to basically redistribute everything to everyone who has no right to it. Further, if I was a capitalist, if I was this uber capitalist, wouldn't I want the illegal aliens in here who typically, well, let's say maybe don't work for the highest wages? I mean, wouldn't capitalists be doing backflips for them? Again, finally, Owen, let's say you get what you want. You got a magic genie, and he gives you one wish, and you wish for the socialist ideal where the wealth's redistributed and everybody gets it all equal. And there is a flaw with that. I'll get to it in a minute. But everybody's all equal, and the land is socially owned, and blah blah blah. And your needs are provided for, and you get a free house. And why would anyone work? What would be the motivation for people to get up and work? The answer is there is none. And I'll give you another analogy. The CEO of Walmart, I believe it is, I believe he makes $20 million a year. His employees, there's about 2 million people that work at Walmart. If he were to take his entire salary and distribute it equally among his workers, they would each get about $10. So again, the idea is, and again, you're fine with personal property, but you also want to take from like Bill Gates, who invented a computer program that made him more money than God, taking all that money from him by force, because that's the only way you can legitimately get this done. Because I don't see a lot of people going, sure, I'll give my money to this person and this person, and blah, blah, blah. Again, and to do that, you're going to have the state do it. Just saying.
Okay. So where shall we start? Let's focus on. Let's give it Bill Gates actually, because you mentioned him. Bill Gates did indeed build his computer, but did he? Who made the computer? The physical
Steve
computer?
Jobs. They
Every
built
single
it.
one?
They built it in. Well, he didn't build the computer. He built the software for it, and Apple was started in a garage.
Oh, I'm sure it was, and it's very impressive that they made this software. But what I mean is, who built the models? The actual like computers for sale that you see in the shops.
Well,
And
for
in the
Windows, it would be IBM, which was an American company.
Oh no, I mean
Dell.
like who physically, with their hands or operating the machinery or whatever, who built the computer?
Well, as in the case of those two, Americans.
Oh, the garden. No, it doesn't matter where they're from. Just who built it? Was it Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and every other?
Well,
Was it? It's a simple question.
the first ones, yes.
Yeah.
After
Ones.
that, they hired people at a mutually agreed wage, and they did it for them. This is the other thing. You do know that nobody is forced to work these jobs.
What was it you said earlier, Warcorpse, about people in sweatshops choosing between working in a sweatshop or potentially starving?
Okay.
But going back to what I was saying, if Bill Gates and Steve Jobs didn't actually, physically build these computers, and even the ones they did build, are you telling me that they were the ones who got the silicon out from the mine, or shipped it over to America, or drove the van which took it from the dockyards to the warehouse? and then another van to the warehouse to the shop where they bought it from. All that labor that went into it, and it's just those two who get to have their fortunes, whilst the rest sort of get pittance.
Well, no,
Is that fair?
but this is the other thing. Uh, the guy that drove it, he worked a job that he consensually agreed to the wage that they paid him. The guy that owned the shop that had the circuit boards that they needed, he got money off of it. And yes, it is fair because they created a product that everybody wanted. The guy who ran the computer shop where they got their original parts from, he had products that not that many people wanted. Like, this is the way it is.
Well, no, hold on a second. Firstly, you said that both parties agreed to it. Now, obviously, the capitalist is going to agree to it. You know, the person with the massive upper hand in this negotiation, because they're very wealthy and they already have a substantial living. But the worker who's driving the van or collecting the minerals or putting the computer together piece by piece in a factory somewhere, if they don't take this job, then what's going to happen to them if they don't accept these conditions? Of you get pittance whilst I get a fortune. What's going to happen to them if they don't accept that?
Well, they can find another job
that pays them their labor's worth
or more.
No, I have received the produce of the thing. So not receiving minimum wage, receiving the equal amount of produce that company is generating. So in other words, a company where there's not a billionaire in charge of it, basically. Is there another opportunity like that where it's fair? I mean, you're not going to receive a minimum wage or an extra dollar more, maybe an actual substantial difference.
I can tell you, I have had 3 different jobs, and I've gone up about $7 an hour from where I was.
Now that's a lot better.
That's just from jumping jobs. What happens is you don't like your job or you don't think you're being paid fairly. Either you talk to your boss or whoever you need to talk to get a raise, or you start looking for another job and you go work for them. Or you take advantage of opportunities within the company for promotions or what have you. This idea that there's one guy at the top that is just sitting back, doing nothing, counting $100 bills, and everybody else has to do all the work. I mean, again, everybody who got a job with IBM assembling computers did so voluntarily.
But it's not voluntary, though, is it? Because whilst they obviously that particular job, yes, but the role of worker, the role of being the commodity of the capitalist to extract profit from, that's not voluntary, that's forced. Because if you don't consent to this
it's not forced.
What happens if you don't go and work for someone? What happens if you don't go and...
Well, you can work for yourself.
How?
Well, thanks to capitalism, that is now easier than ever before because Amazon.com stores are free.
No, but what would you... So how are you going to make that into a living?
Find a product that enough people like that you can
afford already.
Yes.
Like what? Enlighten me. Because
could be anything. Make a better guitar. There's the old saying: build a better mousetrap.
How are you going to do that if you've not got a living, or you're just starting from nothing and you've not got a living? How are you going to afford the parts and the time to tinker around with this stuff?
Okay, so you get a job that maybe is not your dream job, but pays decent. There's a lot of them.
I thought you said you had a choice. I thought you said you had a choice and you didn't have to go and work there because it's voluntary. Your example for not going to work there involves going to work at an exploitative.
Okay. But here's the thing. This is where it is voluntary and this is where it is consensual. If you do not like this particular, let's say, construction company, you are free to go get a job with another construction company that will pay you what you think you are worth.
Well, they might give you a marginal increase, but they're never going to give you your labor's worth because then the person on the top is not going to be able to accrue their fortune. This is the point I'm trying to make. It's a system where Sure, maybe saying Tesco has a marginal increase on how much they're paying to Asda, perhaps, but it's still one that pays the worker pittance, whilst the person on top is making a lucrative salary.
They're also assuming all the risk. They're also
they're
paying
not
for
though.
everything. Yes,
What's
they
more,
are.
what's more what's more risky, losing $1 million when you're already a multimillionaire, or losing your minimum wage job and not being able to pay your rent and potentially being out on the streets?
Okay,
It's not about.
we were talking about having nothing. Okay, if a guy starts a business, and let's say he grows it and he gets 100 employees, and he is, as you say, giving his employees a pittance, then if that business goes belly up, the employees will walk away with a severance package. That guy will walk straight into bankruptcy court and leave with most likely nothing, possibly losing his home, his savings, and everything else.
That's not quite. For one, the person who starts with nothing very rarely actually ever gets to a position where they own a business. But for two,
Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Thomas Edison.
They didn't start with nothing, really, did they?
They started with nothing. I was in their parents' garage.
Well, they still had a home, didn't they? They had a garage to do their stuff. They had time.
Okay, they were living in their parents' house, but
their parents were, relatively well off, though. It's fine. They weren't billionaires from birth, but they still, if you've got a whole garage to yourself and time to just go and build a computer, then you've got more time than a lot of people have. And the person who's having to, take themselves from corporation to corporation trying to find a living is not, normally the person who can have the time to just suddenly make a computer. And you got to also consider the amount of luck that's involved as well. Steve Jobs and thingy, there's a big gap in the market then for that sort of thing. But imagine today trying to build a computer that was going to outsell like Apple or something, or Microsoft. Like, that's not happening unless you've already got a substantial amount of money to play with to begin with.
That's why you need those great big rich capitalists, because if I invent a computer program that is superior to Windows, a rich guy is going to go, "Holy shit, this is a great idea. I want to invest a shit ton of money into your company so that you can grow really, really rapidly, and all you will have to give me in return is X." That's how this works. That's the thing that, that's what rich guys do. They invest their money. They don't just sit on it like Montgomery Burns from The Simpsons and just hoard it like Scrooge McDuck.
I mean, that's not actually too far from the truth. I mean, maybe they aren't as maniacal as Mr. Burns, but it's not as people are. If they've got several billions, just sat in the bank, what good is that for economy? That could be money that's made to help everyone.
That's
and
why they
what you're saying,
invest it.
Well, they don't invest, anywhere near what could be used. And even it shouldn't be their money to invest in the first place. But also,
why? They earned it.
They didn't earn it. The worker who made the computers,
and he paid them for their labor.
How, if they, paying them a few dollars an hour whilst they're making, several billion is not fair, is it?
Okay, what would be fair? What would be your minimum wage then?
It wouldn't be a minimum wage. There wouldn't be a tiered system that allows one person to profit off everyone else and make.
Who's paying everyone else behind you?
Sorry?
Okay, so if nobody's going to make any money and nobody's going to, there's no incentive to work. So why would anyone do anything?
There is incentive though. There's the betterment of society. There's enjoyment. There's
no, that humans don't care.
Yes,
Trust me. Humans do not care about one another. That was the other point I wanted to bring up. You brought up the cavemen. Okay, in cave societies, there was brutal conflict, okay? Usually between caves. Now, caves would share with their caves, but much like ape society, which we're not that far removed. Well, we're a little bit farther removed. But they would share with each other, but normally, Thag and Ugg would go beat the shit out of the males of another cave, and usually what they were looking for was food, or usually women. Women were the valuable resource back in that time.
Um, okay, so firstly, like you said, they shared in tribes, and yeah,
In
obviously I'm not
tribe.
going to say yes, but that's still community sharing. That's still sharing resources, and yeah, sure,
But
they weren't at the stage where they
they had no
considered other.
problem slaughtering the other community.
Of course, no, I'm not saying that, obviously that was bad, but that doesn't change the fact that within their own tribes, they looked after each other. There's evidence of, the disabled and, the people who
Mm,
could not fight being looked after and living to an older age.
they
There's
probably killed them, actually, or
no,
just left them behind.
that's not, no, because they got given, ceremonies. They, were given sort of decorated like shrines and stuff and graves. Um, the cavemen aren't just these like thugs who just bash each other. Like obviously the tribal warfare existed, but that was in at the time. If you're still in early sort of formations of humanity, then yeah, that's going to be a thing. But within people they considered their own, they looked after them. They saw them as their equals. They didn't see, oh, we're going to try and dominate each other. They thought, oh, we are one and we're going to look after each other. And
Well, no, there usually was an alpha in the tribe.
that's not, well,
There's an
no,
alpha in ape societies. There's an alpha in most animal societies. Even have an
that's not
alpha.
that's not really true though, is it? And the guy who actually came up with that theory has since updated it and sort of gone back on a lot of what he said because he found it to be a bit inaccurate and a bit misleading. Um, it's
What, that
not.
apes don't have an alpha? I mean,
Well,
I
there's
tend
no
to think
like
we were a lot.
there's no like genetic defined. Oh, I'm an alpha.
Well,
Um,
we've had every society that we've ever had has somebody at the head of it, be it an
but it
elected
doesn't though.
president, or be it we've never had a society that is that doesn't have
Well,
a hierarchy of some sort.
firstly, that's not the case. But secondly, like even if that was the case, why would that mean we couldn't, evolve further to a point where we could get better? There's no point saying, "Oh, it's not been done before," because
Because
what kind of
again,
argument is that?
you're going against our predator instincts.
But that's ridiculous, though, because there are lots of things we do which don't,
I mean, it's a
inherently.
nice thought, but I don't think you're. I mean, here's what I always say about socialism or communism or it might work if we weren't human, but we're human. We're still predators. Again, capitalism is the best system that
But
fits us. It's made the world what it is, and it's a pretty awesome place.
As we have already discussed, it's not a system that is producing; it's a system that's distributing the production so poorly, allowing for how is it an efficient system to allow a handful of wealthy people to essentially have control over the world's produce? Um, you're talking about a system in which we're destroying our planet. We're actively like seeing people die for no real reason, and they didn't have stuff that was readily available. Like, I mean, look at the people who are missing meals to pay their rent, whilst shops just have stores full of food just rotting because no one's around to eat it because they can't afford it because the company won't sell it for free. It's allowing people to hold such colossal um, what's it called? Resources and stuff. Um, and we look at just the framework of the world around us, and you can't sort of look at it and say anything but, oh, things need to change. There's, I don't really buy any of the arguments about, oh, it's in our predatory nature anyway to be capitalist. But even if that was the case, why would that mean we would have to stop trying to improve the system and reform and ultimately replace? Where oh, because it's in our nature. It's like, no, there's no inherent nature to any animal. Evolution is literally about um,
There,
improving ourselves to survive more. And ultimately, the
there's
system
no
that's
inherent nature. Yes, every animal has an inherent nature. It's the lion's inherent nature to want to kill everything on the planet. It's the tiger's inherent nature to want to kill whatever it eats. It's a crocodile's inherent nature to kill anything.
okay, well, they are more basic animals, aren't they? They're not animals that have the level of thought and intellect and
Well, it's
emotion
in
that we do. Do we? Like it's
well,
like it's hardly as though you can compare lions in the pride, in the savannah trying to hunt prey to survive, to human society now. It's a little bit absurd, really, to sort of place them on the same level and say, oh well,
no, we're kind of the same. It's just humans are the only animals that realized, hey, instead of trying to run down our prey or hunt our prey and shoot our prey in the woods every fucking day, hey, how about we just pen them up over here and we'll kill them as we need to.
well,
You know,
that's
that's the
evolution,
only
isn't it?
difference.
That no,
And
it's not the only
and
difference though, because why would we spend time doing things that um, like why would we spend time doing things for leisure, for instance, like playing a video game, reading a book? Like these things don't directly contribute to any of the survival things. Yet they are things we do because we have evolved. We are more than just the organism trying to multiply and survive. It's become to the point where we can actively analyze our system, have conversations like now, and think about stuff. And ultimately, we shouldn't be thinking, oh well, it's in our nature to have this system which conveniently benefits a handful of people at the top of society. Why is
actually,
it?
it benefits everybody,
It
Owen.
doesn't though, because
Yes, it does.
it benefits people who are dead because they didn't have
Then why
access.
is the world so much better? And why has everything gotten better in every country that has adopted capitalism been better off for, and every country that has rejected it or went more socialist been worse off for it? Why did we spend so, I mean, look at Rome. Rome was a fairly capitalist society. And then when it fell, the world was set back 1,000 years.
Well, Europe was set back. The rest
Well,
of the
yeah,
world was
Europe
doing all right.
was.
Um,
Well, Europe was set back. Well, okay, to be fair, Western Europe was really set back 1,000 years. Eastern Europe and the Middle East was the Eastern Empire did okay. To be
well, lots of the sort of founding not institutions, the components of like basic maths and medicine came from different parts of the world, like in the Middle East and in in Africa and stuff. Um, so I wouldn't say that it's a little bit Eurocentric to sort of uh, suggest the world was a bit stagnant, and it was our corner of the world that was stagnant. But the world overall. But regardless, that doesn't change that capitalists. You know, you can't attribute things getting better to capitalism. It's like I've said, it's the labor that does these things, that makes medicine or um, learns about technology and makes things better. It's the capitalist that misappropriates the value of that labor from the workers to the capitalist. Because for all we say, oh, we've got these technological advancements, we still have poverty. We still have, and poverty. Technically, there's more money, there's more resource, and there's more technology and stuff. But poverty is still a big thing. There's still people who are determining, oh, are you in poverty or not, do not take into account the fact that living very close to poverty is still a needless struggle that doesn't need to happen. People who are not quote unquote not in poverty, but one one incident that's going to cost a few hundred like dollars or pounds is going to massively set them back and potentially even ruin their lives. Look at how many people in across the globe live paycheck to paycheck, essentially barely getting by, barely paying their rent needlessly, when we have so much in food, land, electricity, resources, just in general. Everyone should be able to have a fair life. Yet because we allow this system to exist where so much is controlled by the top band of people, whilst the rest just needlessly suffer, we're actively sort of ruining our world. We talk about productivity. How much further could we be if every single person born had a fair and equal opportunity to get to achieve in the fields that they want to? Like imagine if the next, I don't know, Einstein could have come from the anywhere like Brazil, Burkina Faso, Bhutan, anywhere. But instead, it's unless you're wealthy or extremely lucky, you're not going to get the opportunity to do that. Look, imagine if, there's 20 million people who die every year, or it's probably more than that, to be honest. But the people who die every year because of needless poverty and stuff, one of them could have been the next great scientist, someone who comes up with the cure for cancer or something.
And one of them could eventually arise to be the next Hitler too.
That doesn't. That's a little bit
but
different,
but
isn't
well, you're saying they're going to be the next Einstein. That's
it? I
almost
said
as
there's
ridiculous.
there's a good chance that one of those people, in fact, all those people had a life that they deserved
But
to live, just being human.
but
And
here's the thing. Okay, let's say okay, again, to do what you're wanting to do, you're going to have to, at the point of a gun, reappropriate all this. Let's just say private farmland, and food is now free. Why would anyone produce it? Why would anyone go through that?
well,
Because
firstly,
farming sucks.
it's communally owned for once. It's not like it's just like left up to the
Okay,
business owners.
hold
It's
on.
not.
I want to go this point by point. Okay, it's communally owned. Okay,
Mm.
so the community would own this farmland. Okay, so I assume that then everyone in the community would pitch in and help to make this, let's say this farm, let's say the 100 acres. Everyone in the community would pitch in and make this 100 acres viable for
Well,
whatever
the
in the hell we're
people,
growing on it.
the people who needed to. It's worth pointing out that we can utilize technology because we have increasingly an automated system. We're heading more and more towards having a system where we don't need as much physical labor, and
Okay,
hopefully in some fields any physical labor. Like look at how much farming has changed in the past 100 years, where you've gone from countries having most of their workers in agricultural fields to barely anyone. And subsequently, the 100 acres would not need the entire village to go out and plow the fields all day,
okay.
but would
How
only.
would you decide which one of these villagers, or which one of the uh people would go out and work? What, by vote, by the
Well, it would be
chief
just
telling you?
it would be discussed, wouldn't it? I mean, you think for one, some people do enjoy like these activities. It's not as though it's laborious, perhaps for many today, because they're doing it because if they don't, if they don't work the backbreaking lengthy shift, they'll starve. They won't have their income. But change that to a different society, and suddenly it's like people have like time to enjoy themselves, and subsequently, because they've got that leisure, because they've got more enjoyment, and they've not got the threat of death if they, don't work. People, don't mind contributing a bit. People don't mind, doing something that helps society. Be that, being on a tractor or driving a truck or something. But we've also got technology that can do a lot of these things for us. We've got self-driving vehicles on the way soon. That's going to be amazing because it would be amazing in a
Thanks to
society.
capitalism.
No, thanks to workers
Thanks to
producing.
capitalism
No,
giving
because
giving
capitalism
us
is
the
not.
incentive to invent it. So,
That's not. Why
okay,
would people just stop inventing stuff?
okay. I want to. I still want to get back to this farm. Okay, so what happens if nobody of, and let's say it's 100 people. I just want to have easy numbers. And nobody of the 100 is like, I'm not working the farm. Where is these people going to get their food if nobody wants to
Well,
work
this
it?
is a.
And what if the people that do work the farm or are forced into it, what if they just say, you know what, we're not working? Now it's
Okay, so
communally owned.
this.
They can't be fired under capitalism. You just fire them and get two new farmers. Um, So please explain to me again, if nobody wants to do the job, and there's a lot of jobs in this society that need to be done, and the only reason that they get done is because the people that do the job get paid exorbitant amounts of money.
Well, this for one, this example is a little bit like contrived, really, isn't it? Because already we've got like 100 people, which is a very small number.
Again, I'm well about the only way a socialist society would work is if it was a small village, but
Well, no, because the world's
then
not. It's not as though like the world's resources are just sort of like crammed into one place. It's like, oh, you all must work. But it's like,
kind
no, well, no, because we've got
the world's resources are kind of crammed into a few places on Earth. A lot of Earth is barren dog shit.
most of Earth is water, actually.
Well, that water's dog shit.
Oh yeah.
Thinks it's so big.
What was I going to say? Okay, so the workers, the people in this village, for one, that farm, the farming land near them is not the only farming land. For two, it's a community decided thing. So it's not as though not one person is going to say, "Oh, we're not doing it." There's going to be a decision reached where it's not like it's going to be people. Obviously, if you don't want to do it on that particular day, that's fine, but someone else can do it. And it's all about compromise and working out who's the best fit for the job on that day. Second, the automation is going to make it easier. It's not as though this one person is going to be like dragging around a plow by hand in like baking hot, dry weather. It's going to be a nice shift on a tractor which, by the way, now that the community and society has put in their effort into making things as good as possible for everyone, that tractor's going to be as efficient as possible. The money's not going to some wealthy billionaire like offshore somewhere, but being put back into society. The produce being put back into society to develop it more. And you think about you say, oh, what if the people who were making the food said one day, oh, we're not doing it? Well, society it's not just the food, it's also the machinery that makes the farms, the distribution techniques to get the food to all the places and stuff. There's more that goes into it than just one bit of labor. No piece of labor is disconnected from the rest of it.
Okay. A couple of things. You keep bringing up automation. One of the great things about being on the cutting edge of anything is this is when you can get insanely wealthy, and this is why that at first you're going to be one of the only people in, let's say 50 villages that can fix our automated whatever. So this is the other thing with labor. If you have a skill that's in demand, you're more valuable. Like web designers. When the internet was first starting up in the 90s, web designers and developers made like $700 an hour. But by 2000, everybody had gotten into it. The market was saturated beyond belief, and they were making about, I think, like 15 an hour. So, this is another thing that capitalism, takes into account, that, hey, this is the only guy that can do it. So, yes, he can charge more. If I got 10 guys that can do it, and also on this communal farm, you said that these people would work just to make their community better. It's a nice thought, and it'd be nice if humans thought that way, but I would wager dollars to donuts that the average citizen of either the UK or the US of A doesn't give a rat's ass about their community. I could care less if my neighbor goes to bed hungry. I just don't care. And that's the way most humans are. Now, there is a problem with this village and this is why I picked 100. How will in a capitalist society, he who owns the farm decides what will be produced? and he's going to go and look, okay, I've got 51 vegans and I got 49 meat eaters. I'm going to allocate more of my land to soybean production and allocate a little land to meat production. Okay? But in your thing where it's all decided by a vote, that means that the meat eaters are fucked because they're in the minority. The
Well,
reason that is like a straight up democracy doesn't really work is because you do run the fear of the tyranny of the majority.
that's not well, for one, the social system wouldn't use first past the post. Like in that scenario, it's not as though it's going to be oh, we won by like 2%, so we're going to have the whole farm. It's community decided, and we have, we utilize all the communities like and society's information and work out how we're going to grow things. So if in this particular incident we had land but we wanted to distribute between livestock and crops and stuff, we would obviously like distribute it fairly. It's actually, the fact that we allow the landowner to decide what happens with their land under capitalism is actually quite a bad thing, because you often see, for instance, TNCs, corporations like McDonald's or something, go to land in like Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa and stuff. Um, you know, essentially take over the produce of the local community, disregard their own practices and cultures and stuff, make one of their horrible waste producing, really toxic farms where livestock are treated like less than nothing, basically. Leave loads of harmful pollutants in the local environment and stuff, also they can make money elsewhere. If you allow workers to own the means of production, to control the land and stuff, suddenly that doesn't happen. Suddenly, there's no wealthy exploiter coming over to try and make cheap costs and stuff, because the community have proper control. Coming back to what you were saying about incentive, people like yeah, sure, it's not like you're gonna have to work, like but the idea that people would be forced into it, what was saying, sorry, the idea that people don't care about their neighbor, um that's just not true. You don't have to be best friends with them, but at the same time, I don't think I actually believe you when you say, "Oh, I don't care that if my neighbor was starving when they go to bed." It's like, oh no, because you know, unless your neighbor happens to be like a complete scumbag, I don't think that people have that sort of view of their neighbors. Um, but a lot of the problem comes from the sort of the pressures of a capitalist society, consistently selling your labor to earn a living, to basically survive on the bare minimum. That's not have the time to speak to your neighbors and just indulge in the joys of life, because you're constantly having to sell your labor to the capitalist to make a living. Like you said earlier, it's work or starve. So what time are you gonna have to enjoy your local thing? Suddenly, if you remove that, if you say, oh, actually, people have human rights inherently, and don't deserve this horrible system being in place on them, um, people get to know their neighbors. People can have the time to enjoy their local community, and thus, if there was a local field which it needed someone to go and ride a tractor around one day, people would be willing to do it. It's not as though it's all just left to one person. Sometimes groups of people can do it, and have a nice time of it, because physical activity is rewarding. People like doing things. People like tending to the earth and looking after animals and stuff. All these things, they become less of a chore like they are under capitalism when you remove the misery and the force that is found under it. It's like when you with kids, it's like when you like sit them down, it's like, you will do your work, you will write this, you will sit here and do this until it's done. The kid's not going to enjoy that, and they're not going to want to do it. But allow them to flourish, allow them to exist, with happiness and sort of enjoyment at the core of their learning and stuff and their growth. And suddenly work becomes something they want to do, something they enjoy doing, something they like talking about with their friends. It's the same concept. Remove that unjust system around it, remove the force and the the negativity and the do it for my benefit, and you'll see society improve, and a lot of the ingrained stuff that we have under the system at the moment will fade away.
Okay, I suppose last little thing on this mythical village we've constructed here. What happens when approximately let's have two villages. One has about 16 members for one reason or another, and the other one has, I think, 15 members for one reason or another, just refuse to do anything at all. That's the number of people in, I believe, the UK and the US, respectively. I just watched a documentary produced by the BBC, as a matter of fact, about a family that is proud as punch to live off of every other British taxpayer. And there's a lot of people in my country that are proud as punch to be living off of everyone else's labor. Under your system that you're talking about, you're going to have these people, and quite frankly, the problem is going to be a lot worse. Human beings, the only thing that gets us up and working is necessity. Like, you don't work, you don't eat. Nobody's going to do a damn thing. It's a nice idea, Owen. It's a nice thought, but again, I go back to the axiom. This might work if we weren't human, but we're human. And the sad fact of the matter is, eventually, what always happens with our societies is that one of these villages is going to attack another one for its resources. And the idea that the human race is going to come together and we're all going to sing Kumbaya and share each other's stuff and share the wealth and share the reason, it's a nice thought, but that's about all it is. That's not where reality is. And that's just the way it is.
Well, again,
one more thing to say. Capitalism has done more because it has allowed people to afford the compassion to help people out in need, because they have resources they can easily lose because of capitalism. Again, the average American is wealthier today than at any point in the nation's history. Again, you look at the world, take it 300 years ago and not even 300 years ago, take it from the 1980s to today. Our lives are immeasurably better, all thanks to capitalism. Or at least the capitalist. Now, I will say this, that yes, even in the capitalist system I'm defending, you do have to have a certain amount of socialism. It's like a cocktail. But socialism should be the bitters in an old fashioned. The government should be the. Okay, I'm making a really shitty comparison here. Okay. The socialism should be the bitters. Government should be the vanilla whiskey, and capitalism should be the Coca-Cola for my society cocktail. Even though I had to throw Coca-Cola in there, I probably would not put bitters with Coca-Cola. I don't know. You can drink over in Europe, right? It's 18 for the drinking age. Okay. Why my country has 21, I'll never fucking understand.
Conservative country, isn't it?
I don't know. I don't know. It was the states weren't going to do it, but then the government did something with the highway funding or some shit. I don't know. just pick an age, America. 18 or my thought is, if you're old enough to sign a contract with the military, you're old enough to have a beer.
Hmm. Um, anyway, I'm going to try and whisk through these next few points quickly because I getting a little bit tired. Not of the conversation, just in general.
Well, yeah, so am I. So, yeah, it's we've been going on for about 90 minutes.
Yeah, about that. So yeah, I'll whiz through these last few points. And then yeah.
Yeah, I'll let you
Um,
have the last word. It's fine.
okay. So in regards to the scenario where the extremely rare scenario, I'll point out that a family of 16 is just claiming benefits and enjoying their life of not doing anything. For one, given TV exposure does a lot of strange things to people, including making them sort of flaunt their situation. And for every person who's living the life on benefits, there's thousands more who are having a horrible time. In fact, the government in my country is quite under scrutiny for the amount of people who have literally died because they've been kicked off their disability benefits wrongly, and not being sort of declared fit to work, not actually been in a state to work, and then died. There's people who are missing meals to pay their rent on the benefits that we're describing. The benefit system as it exists today is firstly not a fair solution because it essentially doesn't do anything to address the theft of value and the wealth inequality. But secondly, is not enough whatsoever. But under this socialist society, people aren't that there wouldn't be a benefit system in the first place. So this family of people that are doing nothing, it's not as though they're doing nothing at the detriment of anyone else. They're doing nothing, because it's their choice. And it's a different sort of worldview, isn't it? Because under capitalism, doing nothing is like a massive plus because it's time that you get to sort of just relax a bit away from the machinery of the capitalist system where you're actively always having to work and work to maintain your income and make sell your labor to the capitalist to profit off. Under the socialist system, it doesn't exist in that way, and therefore that time you've got more time, so you can have leisure time, you can do what you like anyway, and subsequently working for the benefit of society becomes just something to do as a social activity. Like I said a second ago, take away that force and the framework of the system around it, and things will improve. I'd also like to say that the amount of money claimed by fraudulent benefits or people exploiting the system is a minuscule amount compared to the amount stolen from the worker by the capitalist through the wage exploitation system. Where, like I said earlier, capitalist makes billions off the labor of other people. And to close, really, the 1980s is actually quite a good example of why capitalism is so bad, because whilst it is true that there was more wealth generated, it firstly came through globalization, in which the Western corporations took their business overseas a lot and caused a lot of problems otherwise. You see the sweatshops in Southeast Asia, the numerous workers' violations, health and safety ignorances. There's quite a long line of chemical plants in India, for instance, where the severe mistreatment of the capitalists, mistreatment by the capitalists onto local Indian workforces in order to make a quick profit has led to long-term health effects and actual major environmental devastation. Workers' wages stagnated whilst wealth at the top was growing. And yeah, it's true that there's more money, but wealth is not the same as value. And the fact that people have a bigger number on their pay sheet does not mean that their money is going towards anything. Poverty is rising in the West, and regardless of how well it is doing worldwide, that does not change the fact that we still have major problems with inequality. We cannot let the capitalist appropriate the produce of our labor. To attribute things getting better to capitalism is the same as um, saying that Microsoft is the real person who wrote a book because the writer made a Microsoft, used the Windows computer to do it. It's all about appropriation. It's ridiculous. And I suppose to close really, to draw us around to full circle, immigration. Lots of people get worried about immigrants coming and taking jobs um, and what's it called, using up resources. Well, immigrants are just like you and I, just workers from another land trying to better their odds of survival. But the real theft of resources, the real problem, is not the fellow worker, but the capitalist stealing the value of our labor, allowing, hoarding billions, trillions, even if you look at the global impact of it, all for themselves, and paying the worker just enough to survive, if that, barely even enough, because look at how many workers around the world don't have, 3 meals a day, or can't have healthcare, or can't even afford a home and are on the streets. Um, Society has all these needless problems we could just fix by addressing this system. And while you may not want to see it, and you may argue, oh, human nature, or it's just capitalism's better, but a system with all these problems needlessly existing because of our allowance to allow this class system control over production and the produce of said production is not right. That's not right, and we need to make serious inroads to changing it. Sorry to drag that on a little bit.
Okay. Well, I obviously disagree with a lot of that, but I do want to close with one thing. I just hope that everyone this is off topic, but I just hope that everyone in my country can maybe take an example here. I disagree with a lot of what Owen says, but I'm still willing to talk to him. This is something the West is also having a big problem with. And it's the ability to talk to somebody that you happen to disagree with on any number of issues. Last thing, get out of your bubble, people. So that wraps up this one. I will see everyone tomorrow for my debate with Swagta, and we'll be discussing capitalism and socialism again. So,
Wow,
all
what a
right.
coincidence.
All right. I will see everyone later. Owen, have a delightful night.
Lovely. Thanks for having me, Warcorpse.
No problem.